Dry electrode production processes could transform battery manufacturing by cutting costs and substantially reducing the amount of energy needed to produce lithium-ion batteries. Currently, most batteries are made using a wet production process, which involves mixing cathode active materials with solvents to make a slurry. This is then coated carefully onto metal foils to make cathodes and anodes, positive and negative electrodes of a battery. These electrodes are then dried in large ovens at high temperatures. The dry production process promises to cut these steps by applying dry mixed powders directly onto metal foils. One of the pioneers is US-based AM Batteries. I'm delighted to be joined by the company's CEO, Lia Shi, who previously served as president of CellGuard, a global battery separator company.
Well, Lia, thank you so much for being with us today to talk about this fascinating technology. Just starting off, I wonder if you could give us an overview of the dry electrode manufacturing technology and how this works.
Well, maybe if I'm going back to how the whole company was formed, and I think the founders of the company realized there's a problem in the lithium battery production, which is to make an electrode, you need to use a solvent. And this solvent happened to be a lovely toxic chemical called NMP, and the boiling point is 200 degrees. And the people using this solvent to mix with active materials and then coat onto metal foils, current collector. But afterwards, they have to use tremendous energy, a lot of space, a big oven to dry off these toxic materials. And also they have to recover them because they are expensive and toxic. So the founders of AM Battery realized this is a major problem facing the lithium battery supply chain. And they thought, why can't we just get rid of the solvent? So this became the concept of a dry battery electrode process. And the idea they were thinking is instead of using solvent to put materials onto metal foil, they have this powders to electrode deposition directly using electrostatic deposition. So this is the essence of the technology developed by AM Batteries. So we felt this approach can save a lot of energy, at least 40% of energy and 40% capital expenditure and 20% operating expense.
Well, it's obviously a huge figure, 40% reduction. Where does this come from in the process?
That's because the big oven required and will be totally eliminated from this AM battery process. That's why it's making it very attractive to the battery makers.
Well, you've raised $60 million to date, I think. Can you tell us a bit about what you plan to do with that money?
Yes, we're using the money to really scale up something from the R&D lab into actual production lines. And so it requires a lot of capital to do the initial work. And right now we are using the money to move into a new facility, which happened in January this year. And also we're building the first engineering pilot line, which allow us to actually make films continuously at a reasonable speed. And that is what we spend most of our money on. And overall, the company has very ambitious goals. So right now we're building the engineering pilot line. Next year we start to design the production pilot line. Then in 2026 we are trying to build the production lines. So in 3 years we're trying to scale up quickly to the production level.
And eventually you aim to sell this technology to other battery producers.
So our business model is to sell the equipment. So we're going to sell this equipment we developed coupled with the know-how and the process knowledge to battery makers. So that is our vision.
And will you make the equipment in the US or overseas?
Yeah, this is another attractive element of AM Batteries. This is an American company. We're going to build the equipment in the US. We also realize there's a gap in the lithium battery supply chain, even from the funding perspective. Right now, a lot of money going to building gigafactories, mining and the raw material production, and even recycling. But one element is missing right now is equipment makers. So we are really the rare species right now, actually trying to make equipment for the lithium battery supply chain.
And in terms of gigafactories, if you've just built a gigafactory in the US, you've presumably spent a lot of money on building the wet process manufacturing technology. Is this something you can slot in to those plants, or are you targeting up-and-coming gigafactories that haven't been built yet?
Well, mainly targeting new gigafactories because all the investment people has already made to build a wet process equipment or process and will be wasted, right? So usually we're looking at the greenfield. But right now in the US, maybe there's only 100 gigawatt hour capacity. And in the next 7 years, I think it will go 10 times higher. So there's a lot of new plant has to be built. That's why this AM batteries technology is very attractive to anyone who are trying to build gigafactories.
And do you think that will help the US and Europe compete with Chinese battery producers? Because they've obviously already built a lot of their gigafactories, right?
Yes, and this is where that energy saving I discussed, and also the toxic part, do not using solvent is another major element, because in order to build a new plant, you have to get permit, and you have to have environmental concerns. And using this dry process, AM battery should be able to provide a solution which not only save the energy, but also allow the environmental concern to be addressed.
And in Europe, I hear the regulations are quite strict. Can you give us a sense of how difficult it is for up-and-coming battery producers to deal with this solvent?
So on this front, U.S. environmental control is ahead of EPA in the U.S. They already put this nasty chemical NMP already on the list to be for restricted usage. So there's some more interest from Europe side also, just looking at the dry process and trying to build their facilities. And we have heard people and also especially people want to build pilot lines, not a gigafactory, but just even small R&D stations. And they found out getting a permit is really difficult because of the restriction already being imposed by Europe.
Interesting. So regulation is going to drive people to look at this process.
Yes, to some degree, but the other part is cost savings. And as you mentioned here earlier, that in the US, we're all trying to build a supply chain and from beginning to the end. But the equipment side right now is all coming from Asia. And so we have an opportunity to supply equipment locally. And also because of the energy saving, this allows the company to have a better chance to compete with the companies coming from Asia.
So can you give us a sense of the overall cost saving? I mean, if you look at a 20 gigawatt hour battery factory, for example, how much money are you saving?
So some of my colleagues did a 50 gigawatt hour factory analysis. And I think over 20 years, the total saving for 50 gigawatt hour plant is $5 billion. That's a big number. And so I think if I look at one-time saving is 621 million, and then over 20 years, discounted saving is 4.8 billion. And if it's undiscounted, then it's 5.5 billion for 50 gigawatt hour plant. That's a big number. That's a big number, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And are there other improvements you can make in terms of increasing the electrode thickness on the cathode side, for example?
Yes. This is an area that we are taking two steps. First step is in order to attract lighthouse customers or early adopters of technologies. We're trying to tell them we can deliver the same performance at wet process, using the same material you're using. And we use our magic or special formula to mix it for you. Then we use the electrostatic deposition to make electrode. But in the long term, we felt the technology already has the potential to make much thicker electrode than the conventional wet process. And so this has a potential to create higher energy density battery cells. And also we found that this process has a better rate capability because the tortuosity is lower than the wet process produced electrode. And one more thing we are doing is we're building an ecosystem around this dry process. And for example, we formed a joint development agreement with Xeon, which is a leading binder company in the world. Right now, all the binders were developed for wet process. So our vision is by working with Xeon, we can develop a unique binders just for dry process, allow it to actually achieve better performance than the current wet process batteries.
And what about the anode side? Can you make thinner anodes?
Yeah, anode side, this is maybe On the wet process side, they can make a relatively thinner anode as well, but we can also do the thin and thick. But in terms of value propositions, when we talk with major battery makers, they told us that please focus on the cathode work, and because that one actually bring more value to the manufacturing process overall. The anode already, as you know, can be made using water as a solvent instead of NMP. As a result, the concern on the environment front is less already. So that's why value proposition-wise, AM batteries, cathode material development using dry process is more attractive to all the people we're working with.
And obviously these gigafactories operate at quite high speed. Can your process keep up?
So this is the challenge we're facing. We're trying to scale up the engineering pilot line speed. You know, it starts with a few meters, then we're trying to hit 20 meter, 50 meter in the next few months and a few years. And that is ongoing, and that is making the whole thing very exciting, right? You see things changing on a daily basis because you are overcoming one challenge after another. But we are definitely in the phase of scaling up engineering process because we felt we have done the science, fundamental science already.
And in terms of your technology, how does it differ from that of Maxwell Technologies, the California startup that Tesla acquired in 2019?
That's a very good question, and we get asked that kind of question a lot. Maybe at a very high level, I would say the approach from the very beginning is different. Maxwell, you have heard the expression, you have a nail, then you're trying to get a hammer to nail it. And Maxwell is have a hammer, and they have a process to make an electrode for capacitors, and many years ago. And they found, okay, maybe we can find more nails for this hammer. So they 10 years ago, start to develop, trying to work on this process to apply it to electrode manufacturing for lithium batteries. Then 5 years ago, Tesla realized, okay, that could be a very cool way to make electrode. So they bought the company. Then 2 years later, they spit out the capacitor business, but kept the development effort, which focused on converting the Maxwell technology to make electrode for Tesla. So eventually, they became more and more successful. Last year, they commercialized the anode production with the dry process, and this year they are on the verge of commercializing cathode production. So their approach is have a hammer, then find the nail, then apparently they make it work. And AM batteries approach is they find the problem, they find the nail first, then they try to develop the hammer. They found out this nasty process using a lot of solvent. Why can't we use just a powder to electrode directly? Because the Maxwell approach, you have to use a Teflon as a binder to make a freestanding film first. Then you laminate against the current collector to make electrode. So that is the step Maxwell or Tesla is using. In our case, we have powders directly deposit onto current collector. And then we compress it using an engineering term called calendaring to smash everything together, then to make an electrode. So the approach is totally different. As a result, our binder selection is much flexible. And to some degree, Tesla Maxwell is stuck with the Teflon. And trying to mix everything together with Teflon is very energy intensive. And so the mixing piece is very challenging. And in our case, we developed the process, dry mixing, which is more energy saving. And also our process allows us to make a very thin electrode. As you can imagine, trying to make a very thin freestanding film is more challenging. Versus us, we can put just less powders onto electrode, then you can make very thin current collectors. But it's, we're all in the same space. We call it a dry battery electrode space. And sometimes we still call Elon Musk our best PR person, unpaid. We cannot pay him anyway. And you remember 4 years ago, almost precisely 4 years ago in September 2020, Elon Musk stand on the stage saying he's going to convert this 2760 cell to 4680, the huge one. But at the same time, he said they are going to work on the dry battery electrode process. And since then, everyone seemed to be jumping into the game and want to play. We talked to many major battery makers. All of them are working on the dry battery electrode. And some of them are following Tesla's approach, but also finding it very, very challenging. And some of them start to work with the AM batteries. They found out, oh, this is a cool way to do it. But I hope I answer your question. The approach to solve the problem is slightly different as a result of the technique and the process we use are fundamentally different.
And LG Energy Solutions also working on it as well.
Yes, that's right. And LG also announced by 2028 they want to have a dry electrode process in place. And other companies also are doing a similar announcement. So as I mentioned, everyone is working on it and is getting into a very exciting space.
And in terms of your investors and supporters, the list includes Toyota, Porsche, TDK. How are you leveraging the resources and support of these top-tier investors?
So we have some qualification plan or joint development agreement with some of the companies they are associated with. And since it is not in the public domain, I can't elaborate too much. But as you can see, our strategic partners really bring to us a lot of connections and a lot of experiences that we don't have. And this allows us two things. One is allow us to grow very healthy, bring in the talent we need, and bring the technology we need. Second one is many of these companies have their own battery evaluation and the battery production and the battery business. So they could be our potential customers. So from both front, technology development and also the customer acquisition front, these investors are extremely valuable for us.
And how worried are you about the current market? I mean, in Europe, where I am, we've seen battery producers scale back their plans. And in the US, we've seen automakers pull back on their EV targets. How worried are you about the current state of the market?
I felt it's good back to the reality change. And for us, there's two elements. One is, as I mentioned earlier, our technology will be best suited for greenfield. As a result, actually, the window for us is broadened because previously a lot of companies, we're going to build a gigafactory next year. Do you have the equipment ready for me? I said, no, we're still developing the pilot lines. But now the timeline is become more realistic, so we have more time to walk into that window of opportunity. This is the first part. The second piece is maybe during the rush to build gigafactories, many people underestimate the cost involved to build a gigafactory. So that's why more companies coming to us recently in order to have a more better and viable business model. They need to use a new process to reduce the cost. So that's actually create more interest in the marketplace to address a fundamental cost issue. Because 3 years ago, anyone who has some good plan and some good chemistry can put some projections together to have a very good business model. But very quickly, they realize it's not viable if you don't have a very cost-effective process in place. So this creates an opportunity for AM batteries. If I speak macroscopically, and whether it's Europe, in the US, the penetration of EV market into the main overall automotive market still, I think, less than 10%, 12%, especially in the US. So I think the growth potential is still tremendous.
And do you see interest in terms of the CO2 or emissions reduction that you promise, or is it just all about cost?
I think it's have to go hand in hand. And so in the EV market, I think there's a certain bottlenecks. One is a charging station. If you have more of them, then actually you can put more cars on the street than address the CO2 issues. I think I didn't compare. That's a very good question. What is more important, cost reduction or CO2 reduction? I think since the purpose is to reduce the CO2 using this very clean vehicles, I think that is still a good driver to have. But maybe one element I want to emphasize is when you are driving a Tesla vehicle, it is very quiet, very clean, and everyone feel very good. But if you go into the plant and to see how the battery is made, the process today is very energy intensive and it's not so clean. So that's why we felt that AMB is really at the right place to come in, trying to make the process cleaner. We are developing a clean solution for clean or green energy. So that's a very, very good calling card for us.
And to summarize, you basically cut what is at the moment 7 steps to 4 steps, right?
Yep. You always need a mixing, then you need a coating. That part still required, but you take the whole driving oven of your process, and also the recovery system will be removed. And also, before people make batteries, they sometimes have a vacuum drying again, and that step will be eliminated. So you just took out the 3 steps in the manufacturing process. And nowadays, a lot of low-hanging fruits are taken. So when people say, wow, this kind of big numbers, 40%, 20% reduction, and people get excited.
And in terms of the cathode active materials that come in, can you take the same input materials as a conventional process?
And so as I mentioned at one time, right now we're trying to make the barrier to entry very low for lighthouse customers or early adopters. So to minimize the anxiety, we usually tell our customer, use the material you want to use, and we'll mix it for you. And as a result, when you look at the final electrode, the composition of the material is the same as what they are using in the wet process. So that is our starting point. In the future, we're working with the different cathode, anode, and also binder manufacturers, trying to ask them, knowing that we are not using NMP, we have a powder to electrode process. I think a lot of the additives you put into this active materials are not necessary. So just get rid of them and make a material for me, dry process. But that is on the project development side. And I think in the future, we will have a better performance than wet process. But overall, responding to your early questions, we are trying to take the material customer is using, and then they feel comfortable that knowing that the composition has no change, and the only change is the process to put the material onto the metal foil.
And in terms of future battery technologies such as solid-state batteries, are you looking at that, and how does that fit into your process?
The process we're using is agnostic, so we can use it for lithium iron phosphate, and it can be used for sodium ion batteries and also for solid-state batteries. And of course, solid-state battery has different chemistries, so sometimes we need a separate dry room, and if the nickel content is very high, and sometimes people use sulfur, is in many of the technologies, and we have to have a separate equipment. But technology-wise, is applicable to those. And sometimes I hope it's not disparaging to all the people who are trying to make gigafactories. We tell ourselves we are selling shovels for all those people who get into the gold rush. And regardless how they want to find the gold, we just sell our shovels. That is what our technology can do for all those people trying different things.
And just in terms of your personal history, you used to work for CellGuard, the separator manufacturer. What did you learn from that experience, and why did you want to join AM Batteries?
Okay, at a professional level, I would say that CellGuard was a separator business and has become the largest separator producer in the US. But overall, the business has, over the years, become a commodity business. So I was very happy running it, but when the opportunity came to really change the landscape of lithium-ion batteries, I jump on it. So this is just the impact is much larger. And also at a personal level, even within CellGuard, I was working on many different projects, and we just finished a big project. It's a joint venture over the just during the period of COVID-19. And during this time, I realized I really get excited with building something from, in October 2020, I was visiting the site. It's just a bunch of farmland. Then 2 years later, I went over there. Then when I started to build the plant, and everything became very, very successful. And a lot of risk was taken, but I just found it very exciting. So I was, after that big project, I started to do moonlighting for Asahi Kasei, which is a parent company of Celgard, trying to do more projects. Then this opportunity come along, and I compare the excitement. I felt, wow, this one has really cool technology, and I want to do it. So the timing was very good also. So that's why I joined. And also this allowed me to do a few things, because Celgard, when I joined the company, I was technical manager many years ago, 20 years ago. And I was focusing on the technology, didn't focus on building the organization. So by the time I was the president of Celgard, certain culture has already been formed. It's very difficult to change. Now at AM Batteries, I think I have a chance to really shape the cultural vision and the mission for the company. So sometimes people ask, so what is your cultural attribute? And we did some study, and then we consolidated into 4 cultural attributes for AM batteries. Number 1 is innovation and creativity. This is the foundation of the company. The second one is interesting, is called transparency. All the managers want to make sure they know what is going on the floor, and all the engineers want to make sure they understand the manager's thinking, and also we want to get the board members on board with what we are doing, especially when we have challenging times. I want to be 100% transparent. The third one is maybe a cliche, is the teamwork and the collaborations. And the number 4 is the resilience and the passion and the drive. So we usually make sure that when we hire people, we share this kind of attribute. So overall, it's maybe going back to your early questions. Joining AM Batteries allowed me to build a company. I felt it will be successful, and it's an exciting opportunity for me.
And just in terms of where you see the industry going, we mentioned LG, we mentioned lots of other people looking at this. Do you have a sense that the biggest Chinese battery producers are also considering using this technology?
On this front, I think a Chinese company might be behind, because Tesla is the one actually created the space 4 years ago. I think Chinese company trying to follow. But so far, I have not seen any major breakthroughs on the Chinese front. And Tesla definitely is leading the way. And then within this space, AM battery became a very viable alternative. We will be smart, and we want to, that's why maybe I can share you, there's 4 strategic pillars for AM batteries. And the number 1 is technology development, scale up of engineering. That is still the core. Number 2 is the lighthouse customers, the early adopters of new technology. We bring them in, work with them, because they tell us what is the real electrode they need, quality requirement, and the technical parameters. Third one is we call it organizational growth. And this is where we're trying to build the engineering team, which is world class and top talent in the world. And we bring in some people from Asia and to build the equipment with us. And number 4, we call it ecosystem development. And this is where we eventually, our vision is we become the ASML for lithium-ion batteries and equipment maker. But to get there, you need a lot of good partners working with you, whether it's a material or equipment. So we'll start to build these ecosystems. And some element will come from Asia, but we are trying to bring in the best technology into this ecosystem so we can become a major equipment producer.
Can you give us a sense of who some of these lighthouse customers are?
You can look at our investors list and get a sense who are we working with. Today, I apologize, I cannot elaborate on the details, but overall, all the top 10 companies in the world we have a contact with. At a very high level, usually we get 2 responses. One is they want to work with us right away. They realize, okay, we have tried to do dry process, but it has not been very successful. Let me try your approach. Okay, give me some samples. They run some cycling performance tests, realize, wow, this one really works. Let's get into a qualification phase. So that is one group of company. The other group of company come in and they look at us and was a surprise. But they said, do you have production line I can purchase? I said, no, okay. Then they said, let me know when you have equipment you can sell to me. Then I will come back. And for now, I will continue work on my own process because most companies have a dry process technology research team internally. Some of them have 3 teams working on the dry process. So they say, okay, give our chance. I want to give my own teams a chance to work on it. But you will be on my radar. Whenever you get some major milestone achieved, let us know. Then we want to come back to work with you. So this is a very positive response overall. But this is the world we're facing. And whenever we bring a new technology into an incumbent major battery makers, actually they are stacking up against their own development team. Then they want to see which one has a better mousetrap. But we are confident we can win this race.
And overall, just coming back to cost, when you take into consideration the increase in electrode thickness and other improvements that you can make, as well as the energy savings, what kind of overall cost reduction are we looking at?
The cost saving part come into maybe 3 major elements. One is the capital investment part. I think the capital required to make 1 gigawatt hour compared with the watt will be reduced by 40%. And this is a capital investment. But people are more interested in operation expense. And our techno-economic analysis result shows we can save operating expense by 20% compared with a wet process. That's just because you use less energies and less space, and also the labor requirement will be less as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been fascinating to hear your insights on this technology and the potential it has. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.